Welcome all. There's going to be a little bit death by PowerPoint today as we go through, but you hold any, I guess, questions to the end, and then Serena will hopefully have things going there well, and we can ask away, and we'll go from there. So I'll put the presentation on, and as Serena says, get straight into it, I suppose. So so we're talking today. Serena wanted me to talk about your new builds versus existing stock, and some of you'll know I'm a bit biased for new builds, but I can existing stock's been my bread and butter up to the last year or so. So I've pretty reasonably well rounded. I can go in with no bias with today's presentation. Yes, a lot of you know who I am, but some I'm not going to go through all this. I'm just an active investor. I was very, very active until I started my real estate company a few years ago and run Property Ventures Real Estate. That used to just be a buyer's agent working for investors, and now it's it sells anything pretty well, from Dunedin through to Whangarei, and also got another wee sidekick company in Tauranga called Blaze Realty that deals a lot in not only residential but farmland and what have you also, and horticultural. So, but an active investor, love it, 24/7. I've breathed this thing for the last 14 years and love what I do. So that's enough about me. What are we talking about today? Basically, the advantages and disadvantages we'll go through first for existing stock, and then we'll move on to the same for new builds off the plan. So new builds off the plan, what do I mean? Either a new build property just finished, or an off the plan property where you're buying something that's not going to be obviously finished for some time down the track. And that could be a townhouse, an apartment, it could be a standalone house, it could be a spec home that you're building. It's a whole lot of things there. Talk a little bit about funding methods, and then particularly, which is important right now, is buying tips in the current market today. And just one other thing to finish off with is just, if you are interested in new build, things to be aware of, because it can go wrong, and unfortunately some of those stories where it has gone wrong turns people off it, which is fine. And we'll do that, and then talking about the experts and how you should be controlling your experts, not them controlling you, because it's your money you're spending and for what you're looking at doing. So we'll move right into it, and unfortunately I can't bring up one step at a time, so that's fine. It's before I get into it, it's a property investing, as a lot of you know, it's a personal thing, and when you start out, you're searching for all these ideas, and you go along to different courses, and you join somewhere like APIA, which is fantastic because there's a lot of experience there in the room wherever you go there. So there's no right or wrong way to do. I love property because there's so many ways to make money from property, and you just got to get something that you're comfortable with, and then do it and go for it. And you can change over time. You can change from maybe renovations or trading to go buy and holds or whatever you want to do. So there's obviously advantages and disadvantages and all sorts of risk in any type of property investing, and it depends on you. It depends on your age, your experience, how risk adverse you or your partner might be. It's quite usual for me seeing one quite risky person and their partner's quite risk adverse. That can be quite good. I hope you don't make too many mistakes between the two of you. Also depends on your earnings, what you earn, or your passive income or income is at the start, when you start. And it depends on your own personal experiences and how long you've been investing for, and maybe contacts or your trade or all those different things on why you might want to do something. And this comes down to, for today's sake, whether you want to buy a new build or you want to buy an existing property. So as I said, you do what you're comfortable with, not what others say. And it is hard when you start out in investing, when you meet people and they go, well, you should do this, or I did that, or I heard this went wrong, or that's happens far too often. So you learn about it, you read, you talk, you listen, and you find out, and then you decide what you want to do, and then you build your team around that decision. And that's the important thing, I think, before you even start talking about getting into what you're going to do, including sort of today's conversation. All right. So let's get right into it. So we'll talk about existing stock to start off with. So existing stock, obviously, places that are finished. They could be 120 years old. They could be a year old. But the important thing is they're finished already. They're existing stock. So I'll go through from the top to the bottom and talk about the points. Easy to make capital gains. Yes and no, probably a yes. But the reason they are easy to make capital gains is you get the benefit of what the market's doing, but also you're getting add value. You can add value to old stock, and that might be by renovating it. And it doesn't mean an old stock has to be a 100 square metre house on a 1,000 square metre section. It can still be an apartment or whatever. It's an existing stock. So you can renovate it, you can paint it, you can, whatever you want to do, you can subdivide it, you can change or add rooms to it. Increasing rooms always adds rent and adds value on the property. So there's plenty of things that you can do to the property to add value when it's an existing property. So that's one of the major features and one of the major advantages in existing stock. You can still make money on a new build, but there's only one way you can do it. We'll talk about that soon. So that's hugely important. The other important thing is that we sometimes come up against with new build people are if you can rent it or move into it immediately. Sounds obvious, but and I've got a lady at the moment. She's got $400,000 she wants to spend on probably a new build, but she wants to rent it immediately. She's going to try to pay cash for it and wants to rent immediately. That's what their goal is. So for her, unless we can find something that's just about to finish, that's not really going to work for her. You need to have an existing property. So and the top 2 points for me are the major advantages with existing stock. You can add value and you can rent it immediately. Simple. Have a proven product. Yeah, if you've got a house that's been sitting there for 60 years with no issues, you'd like to think it might last for another 40 or 50 or 60 years. So that's obviously an advantage. Obviously depends on what it's made of and a few bits and pieces, which we'll talk about on the next slide. Larger sections, predominantly, I guess. The older the property is, probably the larger the section will be. So that's obviously good for a whole lot of reasons. And you can see, touch what you're buying. So many people haven't got an imagination, or they can't think what that place will be like when it's finished in 6 months' time, or a year and a half's time, when it's just an old house that's about to be pulled down and we're talking about a new build on there. So you can see and touch what you were buying with an existing property. And of course, bank friendly. We'll talk a bit about that later on. I guess it's the friendliest banks will be with a second-hand property within reason, because then if it's too old or starts getting issues or made of a certain product, then the banks certainly aren't friendly with you. So that I put it in there, but it's you can, I guess, take that as a positive or negative on both types of property. As I was meant to say right on the start with this presentation, I haven't gone researching or trying to copy advantages, disadvantages on the web. I've just done what I see in my job every day, and I see when I'm buying or selling, or other investors doing the same. That's all. Really, all my this whole presentation is based on. So the other advantages, and I said the main 2 there are the top 2: add value and capital gains. Add value and you can move in straight away. So the disadvantages of existing is a few things. Hidden issues, and you don't get that with a new build, I guess, because it's new and it has just been signed off by the council. Hey, who knows what happens in the future, but now you shouldn't have any. Obviously, there's so many hidden issues can happen with an older house. The older it is, probably the more people can hide it if they are trying to hide it. There's just different mechanisms these days that you shouldn't be able to hide it, and agents can't hide it. But obviously under the house, unless you get a builder to go under there and check that there's not damp under the bathroom or the kitchen. You might get a meth test. You might have weak structures you don't know about unless you get a really good inspection done. Someone could have done anything to that building and didn't do it properly and haven't declared it, or the people that lived there beforehand might have done that. Leaking. There's leaking. Different structures exterior might be made of, or roof. or what have you. It's nice buying a house if you have to replace the roof in a year. There's 25,000, maybe more. That's one of the disadvantages, I guess. So I guess the story out of that is eliminate some of those issues by getting a really good building report, get a mess test done, spend money on those things, and you start eliminating some of those hidden issues. Here's one that Serena will absolutely love, government rules. And stop laughing in the background there or swearing at me, Serena. Government rules to get to standard, and that's been a big issue the last 3 years, I guess, since the Labor-led government have come in. Not blaming them, that they've needed to make some changes and needed to make. There's nothing wrong with having homes healthy and good for tenants, and they should have a certain standard. What they have done, they've gone to the extreme rule where they've brought all these rules in. They've cost investors, as a lot of you know, thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars, and then they've taken off like the bits of the tax advantage that you used to get, where you could have a loss against your property and it's offset against your earnings, so you get your bit of tax back. By having everything smashed into 3 years like they've done, forget about the current new rules that's going through government at the moment, that's been, you at APIA will know a lot about right now, is they've really made it really hard. And I remember a year and a half ago, I was talking to a couple of property managers within a two-week period, and they all were saying the same things, that some people were selling up their old stock because they were scared or didn't want to get it up to the appropriate level, or whatever it might be. So that's, I guess, just a disadvantage by having an old stock. You go there and you renovate it, and you get all the Healthy Homes Act up to the standard, and you're right. So the place is good, and you keep going forward. So again, it's about eliminating these disadvantages that's on your screen right now. Ongoing maintenance and expensive repairs. That's obviously, for me, one of the biggest disadvantages. When I first learned about property 15 years ago or so, and they were saying, "Oh, put $1,000 or put $2,000 in for your maintenance." Well, if you did that, and you had 20 properties, you'd go probably bankrupt pretty quickly, because $2,000 might be enough to do the ongoing maintenance, but that doesn't include the things like that come up with plumbing issues, or a new roof, or the big ticket items that you just need to do every 10, 20, 30 years when you own a property. So that's one of the, I guess, the disadvantages about existing stock, probably one of the biggest ones for me. Little tax advantages, as I just mentioned, you now can't offset that against your own income. Good point is, though, if it's all within the same, I'm not a tax expert, but if you do have losses from a couple properties, and you get a good positive cash flow property and another property in that same portfolio, then you can offset it against each other. So there are different ways of doing it, and your creative accountants will be able to help with that. So that's all good. For me, along with the maintenance issues, this is one of the other biggest disadvantages, is it can be harder to tenant. And what I'm meaning by that, and I'll talk a bit more about that shortly, is if you have a tenant looking at a place and they've got a choice between a brand new build or an older place that looks older, which one are they going to pick? So I'm just saying, you will, in my opinion, what I've experienced, you get more people inquiring about a new build than you do a second-hand or an older property. But I'll cover that a little bit more in the next couple of slides. So keep that in mind. They're the sort of two main advantages. The main two disadvantages for me is the maintenance and the harder to tenant. The other bits and pieces you can eliminate a wee bit by doing your research when you buy an existing house. All right, moving forward now to new build or off the plans. So I'll go through again from the top. So lower LVRs, and I'll talk about that in a moment when we talk about the finance side of it. It is, at the moment, they've taken LVRs off, but now and again when they come back on in a year's time, you have to put less money into a new build than you do an existing stock. So that's all good. Better class of tenant, that can be debatable. If you might have a second-hand place, or an older place that's been done up in mint condition, you should demand a good tenant for that too. So there's a few I'm pretty generic with some of these terms that I use today. But on that point of the tenant, good examples. I've got 2 places in Te Atatū, and in fact I've got one in Te Atatū Peninsula and one in Te Atatū South. Now, traditionally you go Te Atatū South, the better option to live rather than Te Atatū. Te Atatū Peninsula is better to live than Te Atatū South. So I've got a second-hand, about a 25, 30-year-old place in the peninsula. Pretty small, 68 square metres. It's like 3 bedrooms, so it's a very small 3-bedroom. Got a big deck. And in Te Atatū South, so the lesser of these 2 suburbs, if you're out of Auckland and don't know them, I've got a new build in a complex there, and it's actually bigger than a 3-bedroom, but it's only 2-bedroom. So out of those 2, I always have trouble renting the older one. And various factors for it, obviously, but I always have trouble renting it. They both rent for $530 a week. They're both worth the same amount. They're both worth about $630,000 to $650,000. I've just had someone move out, and after a while we've got someone to move in. But I've had some pretty indifferent tenants in that place, in the older place, and we've had several issues with neighbours because of my tenants. We've got rid of them, and now we've got another one moved in and gone, and now another one just moved in. So hopefully all will go well. And the other one, I've had a professional, 2 girls working there since it was brand new. I'm living there a year and a bit ago, and when I bought it brand new, they were great. They've moved out just before COVID, so I had it empty for 2 months, unfortunately. And now I've got a doctor and his wife and child living in there. They pay a month in advance. I've never had that before, and they're great tenants. So that's. And I remember when I first had it brand new, probably about a year and 4 months ago, about the 2 professional girls working there, was I had such a good option of who I wanted. I had about 80 people looked at it, and I showed 4 people through, and I would have been happy with the worst of the 4 groups I showed through. So the tenant is a big one. Not only the class of it, but more choice of tenants, and about should be rented soon. But that's a generic thing, as I said. If you've got a nice property, it can be 50, 80, 100 years old in Ponsonby, and you should get a whole lot of tenants in there. But just generically speaking of older stock that looks older compared with new that looks new. So that's what I'll say on that. But that's for me one of the major advantages. As we said, little or no maintenance. I've chucked 7 there. I've put 7 for a reason. I've talked to an investor that started out 7 years ago. They've moved from Wellington to Auckland now. I talked to them some time ago, and they said about the first property he ever bought was I think it was an apartment in Wellington, and he says it's been great. And I says, why has it been great? And they said haven't had one day without a tenant, and I haven't touched a cent on maintenance in 7 years. So that's why I put 7 years down. It could be 2 years, it could be 10 years, but it comes with guarantees for usually a year or 6 months or 2 years if anything goes wrong with the property, plus hopefully a master bill guarantee, whatever they're worth. So that's again one of the major points for me. Advantage of new builds, you can buy well, and unlike existing stock where you can add value very easily, you can't with new builds. So for me, the only way of making money, apart from getting capital gains over a period of time, is buying well. And how you buy well is you buy not necessarily the first, but in the first release of properties for a new build. And so this doesn't help with a spec home house on a bit of land. This is for a townhouse, or can still be standalone, or a townhouse or apartment in a group of other townhouses in an area. And if you need, there might be 30 or 40 properties, or 20 or even 10, the developer will need so many properties sold before the project is confirmed happening. And that's when you buy, because that's the cheapest a build will ever be in that complex. And it doesn't matter what's going on outside that area, that's the time to buy, because that's when you can make your 10% under, or 50k or 60k or 20k or 100k, depending on what it is, without any capital gains. So for me, that's I'll talk about it in other events I've spoken to, so I won't dwell too much on that today. You can still depreciate chattels as you can with a existing stock, but if it's an old property, the chattels are worth very, very little. If you've got a new house, it's got new carpet, it's got new curtains, it's got new hot water cylinder, it's got new ovens or what have you. You can depreciate chattels, and you can add up quite a lot, and you can get some money back from that. So that's but talk to your accountant about that. Capital gains with only a 10% deposit. What I'm meaning by that is if you buy something now that's not settling for a year and a half's time, and it's in a good market, a hot market, I don't rely on making anything during a period while we're waiting for a place to be finished. But if it does, it's a real bonus. And imagine if you bought something in Auckland 4 years ago, 3 years ago, and you didn't settle for a year and a half, you would have made probably 150k on each of those properties. So what I'm saying is you can get any capital gain. For me, that's a bonus by paying your deposit when you go unconditional on it. It's not finished for a year and a half. Hope that makes sense. It's built to the latest building codes and specs, has to be signed off by the council, so hopefully you've got a pretty new modern place. So for me, along with the maintenance and tenants, for me the other biggest one is for new builds is Generation Y and Z. And I dream of being able to be called Generation Y or Z, but I'm way too old for that. But I have the same mentality these days as a lot of those people. So these are people who are usually in their 30s and lower, and Z I think is about 25 and lower. But these things here in the computer world have changed what we're all about these days, and what a lot of young people are about, and they're about going, having a good time, not sitting at home painting their fence or doing their lawns or doing their bushes, trimming back their bushes around their 1,000 square metre section. They want to go and see what's on their phone and go and have a good time, or go and see their friends and whatever it might be. That's just a sign of the times. That's where society is these days. And for me, that affects what people look at. And I'm astounded and surprised at how many young people, they want their first home to be a new build. And that's just a sign of the times. Not only that, for me, back to the tenant side of it, when a year and a half ago was my first real realisation at the place in Te Atatu South I had, was when I actually looked after it myself, trying to rent this property, which was good exercise to go through, was there were a lot of people, young people, good people, and people in their 30s, and they just wanted a new place they could have as their pad, and they could go away and do whatever they want to do outside that. So Generation Y and Z, I think, is a huge part of why new builds is an advantage over the other. Again, I'm being stereotyped here. I'm assuming older existing stock might not, it might be a section or what have you. It doesn't have to be. It can still be a townhouse or an apartment. So it just depends. There's something to be aware of anyway, regardless whether it's a new build or existing stock, as people want simple these days. So going on disadvantages of new builds. This is one of the biggest disadvantages. It might not get financed for an entire waiting period. What I mean by that is, if there's a year and a half between now and when you finish it, you can't get finance to say, yes, you will be approved in a year and a half from now. The banks won't do it, brokers can't get it. That's just a sign of the time. So there's some sort of risk dimension, I guess, of buying a new build for that reason, because if you're on 2 incomes right now, no kids, in a year's time, you decide to have a child, partner gets pregnant or you get pregnant, and all of a sudden a year and a half comes, you're now on one wage, you might not necessarily get the same finance than you were approved for right at the start. So that's that is one disadvantage. And so the way I look at it is, always look at now, are lending, and I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not a broker and I'm not a banker, but I'm going, is it hard to get finance at the moment? In fact, right now it's bloody hard to get finance. So can you get approved now? If they say yes now, that's a good thing. What's likely to happen in your life in the next year or 6 months or a year and a half, whatever that period might be? And if it's going to be similar or better, and you never know, that's the risk factor, but it's going to be similar or better, and you can get finance now, hopefully you'll get finance at the time. Now, that's not a be-all and end-all. That is a risk factor you have to take into the calculation. I guess the other route that you can do, if it is a year and a half down the track, hopefully you've made some money on the property, and you could sell your property If something happened and you can't settle for whatever reason, you could on sell the property to someone else and make a few dollars on the way through. So that's my outs for eliminating that, but that's certainly a risk. Risk of delays, that's just a sign of times. That's what you get with new builds. There's always a chance of a delay. You just never know. Hopefully there's a thing in there called a sunset clause. A sunset clause means that if it's delayed beyond a certain point, then you can have a choice of actually handing the property back and getting your money back, your deposit back. So that eliminates that problem. For example, we're selling Alexandra Park at the moment, ourselves and LJ Hooker, Ponsonby, and we're only there because it has taken so long. There were so many delays in the first 2 years, with especially one of the blocks, but both blocks in the end, that sunset clause has passed and people did hand their property back to the Auckland Trolley Club, and now we've got it back to resell, and this is where we're in there reselling them. So that's what happened there. But the ones who haven't, they've all made anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000-$400,000 on their properties. In fact, some even more than that. So they're going, well, I'm not going to do that. I'll actually settle it and I'll sell it anyway myself and make the profit. So there are different ways around that. But delays is a risk of new builds. Things that happen that's nobody's fault. Look at COVID right now, or COVID for 2 months. That hurt a lot of people. Developers' experience is important, and I'll talk that in the last slide today if we get time, is do your research on the developer. Is this the first thing they've ever done, their first project they've ever done? Is it the company that's building the property, construction company, how good are they? So they're important bits to do. You understanding the contract or the solicitor's lack of experience in understanding contracts is a disadvantage. And what I mean by that, I had some outstanding properties about 2 years ago, just coming up 2 years ago. It looked tricky because the developer was buying from another developer that was going bust at mortgage sale, and we had some 8 on sales the same day they settled the land because there was some property sold it could be people could move into, and some solicitors didn't understand it, and what happened, some people got nervous because of that. They pulled out, and if they brought it, they were basically buying themselves a minimum of $100,000 if they bought that property that day. But solicitors didn't get it, and it didn't go very well. But I'll talk briefly about that if we get time in about 10 minutes' time. The other thing, disadvantage, they may have body corps. I don't really necessarily think body corps is a disadvantage, but existing stock also has body corps. So I put it down as a disadvantage. I was actually, trying to struggle to find a few more disadvantages of new builds, but that's really relevant to everyone. Body corps are okay. Body corp means someone's looking after your property. They clean it. They fix any major issues, minor issues. They do the rubbish. It gets looked after. Pays for your insurance for that. There's no house insurance you have to get that pays for all those sorts of things. So that's all good. Lots of rumours and stuff out there why people thought have had bad experiences. I've equally know people had bad experiences with new builds as I have with second-hand builds. So that goes both ways. All right. A bit funny having no one asking questions at the moment. Okay, so let's go through the last few sort of slides to back up what I've said. Serena asked me to talk about different funding methods. Things are a bit different right now, and I believe Chris Peters is doing something later on tonight, so he's a pretty better person to talk to than me about this. Right now, for existing stock, you can lend up to 80% LVR. So was 70, or go back to 70 in a year at this stage. So you can lend up to 80. So it is a wee bit better than it was, which is good. And that'll depend on a new first home. You might get that or even more. Investors can get up to 80%. Second tier options still apply to both types of funding. Off the plan or off the plan construction type loans. There's 3 types of. I'll put into 3 groups here. There's a turnkey where you buy something off the plan, like a townhouse or an apartment in a complex, and you pay your 85. You pay your deposit, and you don't pay anything else until it's finished. Right at this point, it used to be 80% lend you can get. You can get up to 85 or 90% LVR on if it's your first home. If it's for an investment property, you can get, it starts at 80%. They'll give you at least 80% on that property. It used to be 80%, where existing was 70 at the moment. Since COVID's come in, they've had a year, they've taken the LVR off. New builds starts at 80% upwards. Existing get up to 80%. There's a difference there. Fixed price contract, again, you can get 80% LVR on that. That's when you do a house and land build with a place like GJ Gardner or someone, and you buy the land and you do the build and you pay off at different points, maybe when the foundations are done, when the roof's signed, and you get through that. One thing for me is, if people get upset about fixed price contracts, they're okay. If you're going to get finance approved for a turnkey, you'll get approval for a fixed price contract also. It's just done differently, and the bank provide you the money on when at different timelines during that build. So there's no real issue with that. Labour only, it's probably not the right terminology, but this is when you are maybe building a few properties, or so you the developer yourselves building, and you might get whatever LVR to buy the land and what have you. When you start subdividing or at different stages through the builds, you get it revalued, and then the bank give you more money, and they might give you, so you get a new valuation, they might give you, I think it's 65% against what that new valuation is, which might provide you with a whole lot of money to go on and do the next part of the project. Not going to get too much into that. I'll probably confuse you. If you do, talk to a broker if that's you, if you are looking at doing projects yourself. Okay. So just some buying tips that I see in the current market now. And this is, I think one of my last presentations to APIA was a bit about resale, was about negotiating. And one I've really got is about this first one. Your knowledge is power, and it still is in this market, in any market. The more knowledge you have about a property, the better you can negotiate. So research the property, research the development of it. So if it's a new build, research the developer, research where it is, research the agent you're dealing with. That's also important. I talked about that last time I was talking to the APIA group. If you're looking for something now, talk to your favourite agents, tell them what you're after. Yes, the market is really hot right now. It's been really hot for the last 2 months. In fact, since the last COVID, we stopped there. It's gone hotter than probably anyone that we all thought. There's a lot of reasons for that, and a lot of quite logical reasons when you think about it. But there are still some deals out there, and some places still aren't selling. So talk to your favourite agents, tell them you're in the market and what you're looking for. If you're negotiating, time can be your friend right now. We're finding people are very, very brave and saying, well, I'm not going to sell for that, or I'm not going to do this. 24 hours passes, and all of a sudden the buyer hasn't lowered their or up their price at all, and they'll come back and say yes. So time can still be your friend. It's such an unusual market now, where yes, there's some crazy prices out there. The market is hot, but not every part of the market is hot, and not every property is hot. So there's a lot of variables with it at the moment. So use time to your side. Don't just give up straight away. Be a bit brave for a day or two. If you don't get it, there's another property. It's not an investment property. It's just figures. So we'll work on that scenario. Pick on old listings. What I mean by that, if you go back a year from now, the market had been poor for a couple of years, and this is in Auckland. Had been not that hot for a couple of years, and there were people really hurting with their property. Now, some took it off the market because they go, I just want to take it off the market and come back fresh. When they brought it back on the market, they have been really, some were really desperate, and they were trying to let it go for anything. Then the COVID thing is kicked in. People get really upset and worried when they've been trying to sell their place for a year or so, and things like COVID kick in. It's a real opportunity as a buyer to take advantage of that. As I said, the top point there, knowledge is power. Find out as much as you can about that property. Has it been on the market the last year or 2 years? How many times? Why hasn't it sold? Find out all those things. They're really important things there. But there are properties around there. We've had two in the last month and a half that have been on our books for over a year, and they've just sold. So people got some good buys out of them. In fact, sorry, one of them didn't get a good buy. They still paid an obscene amount of money, but anyway, the other one they got a really good buy. There's a funny one there I just throw in because I mentioned it last time here. Become a friend of an auctioneer. Auctioneers want to sell properties. Good auctioneers do a lot of auctions. They want to sell a lot of properties. Get them to be a friend. Take them for a coffee, take them for dinner, tell them what you're trying to achieve. Give them a call on a Thursday or Friday. Say, hey, how many auctions you calling this weekend? I might be calling 10. Hey, are there any where you think there are actually not many bidders there or no bidders coming along? And then they'll tell you. They're all about stats and trying to get the best stats they can of how many sell on the day or straight after the auction. Become their friend and ask them. They'll tell you. They'll say, oh, actually, for whatever reason, looks like there's going to be none here. Hey, they might be wrong, but sometimes they're not. So that's a good way, and I've taken a good property once by that strategy. Have your finance ready. Being prepared now is essential because if you want to get a really good buy. If you can go on with a clean contract, I'm surprised in the last 2 months how many unconditional contracts we've had. Another one just come through today for an $860,000 place in Auckland, the North Shore, and unconditional. We've probably our fourth or fifth we've had unconditional in 2 months on coming through straight away. If there's a hot property and it fits your criteria, don't miss out on it for $5,000 if it's really what you want, especially in the market at the moment. If it is one of those hot properties, just pay $5,000 extra. I see too many people. They're too. Whether greed is the right word. They just they just want to negotiate. They have to win, and sometimes they give away a big win for them in the future by a small win at the negotiation time. And obviously, find out what the vendor wants. Usually important. If the more you can provide to them, the better you might be able to get what's important to you, not like the price maybe. And new builds, as I said, buy the first in the development or in the first lot of pre-sales in the development. That's where that's where you make your money right now. And some people were. It's really interesting right now. There's a lot of people interested in new builds. There's a lot of nervous people at the moment with new builds, but they're nervous about because they've heard some bad stories, which can be eliminated really easily by doing the right thing, having someone on your side when you buy new builds. But tip, buy the first. If you want to make a lot of money, if you find a place you want to buy at the end of it and it suits you and you want to live in it and what have you, go and buy it if that's what you want. But if you want to make money, be the first off the block. Or obviously land and house packages the other way to make some good money. I saw a few stats yesterday about that versus buying existing, and it was quite in favour of buying a land and house package. Excuse me. All right, almost finished. So just a couple of things to be aware of with a new build, and I'll only go for a few more minutes, Serena. You check out how experienced the developer is and how financially secure they are. I'll just have one point there is, so you can find out easily what a developer's like. You can ask around, you can ask the agent, ask people in APIA group how experienced they are. If they've done a few, that's good. Be wary of small building companies. I knew one company in the South Island several years ago. They got themselves, in fact, the last financial crisis, about 10, 12 years ago, they got themselves a financial crisis themselves, and they were getting deposits for property, for land and house packages, and for the build, and they were using that deposit against someone else's build to finish off. Now that's illegal, should never happen. Excuse me, and did happen, and that's where you have to see how financially secure and ask them. Be brave. Say, hey, can I, just tell them why you're asking, and see what they come back with. If they've got anything to hide, you'll find out pretty quickly. Excuse me. Sunset clause I've sort of briefly spoke about already. Hugely important though, to never buy a new build without a sunset clause in there. And it might be due to finish November this year. The sunset clause will probably be a year later, which is fine because things are delayed, not the developer's fault sometimes. But have it in there. It means if it does go for a year later, that money's not going to be tied up forever. You can pull out if you want to. Make sure your structures are set up and the locations. Make sure your location's good. General property investment stuff. You want to buy in good locations, capital gains. You want to buy in good locations and get good people renting the property and abundance of people wanting to rent your property. And the last one I think I've got here is The experts, mortgage brokers or banks, solicitors and accountants are three hugely important people when you buy. Solicitors as some people know, have upset me in the last few years. What I'll say to that is make sure those three people know what you're trying to achieve if you're starting to build up a portfolio of property. You shouldn't just be another number. You should be someone they know and know what you're trying to achieve, because when solicitors killed quite a few of the deals and missed some, not only first home buyers but also some investors starting out that missed out on $100,000 equity the day they bought a property, and they talked them out of them because they didn't understand, one, the contract, and secondly didn't understand what those people were trying to achieve. If you start out today and you make $100,000 in a week or a month's time, that's a pretty good start to your investment career, because you don't normally get that opportunity. So story out of that is make sure your experts know you and know what you're trying to achieve. Yes, solicitors are there to warn you about potential issues. That's what they're paid to do, but that doesn't mean the be all and end all. You don't have to buy it. There's always going to be potential issues. That's why we pay them, to tell us them. So just be careful with that, in my opinion. So Serena, you can probably come back on. I think that's all of. Oh no, I've got one more slide. Sorry, and I just chucked this on the end there. Never a better time to buy now. Money in the bank. New Zealand, like other parts of the world, might go to something that people don't even understand, with zero interest rates, or sub-zero negative interest rates. And if that happens in other parts of the country and the world. First time I heard it was Germany a few years ago, where you put your $500,000 in the bank and they charge you for the money in the bank. You don't get interest, and that's the foreign stuff to New Zealand, and hopefully won't happen here. But you don't get a lot of money in the bank right now. When I'm getting out of that point, lowest interest rates we've ever seen right now. Uncertainty because of things like COVID provides real opportunity, and it's actually made the market since level 4 hotter than it's been for a long time. But now it's back in level 3. Take advantage of it. I guess uncertainty is always good when you're buying. The election, who cares? What I mean by that is the last election was huge for the market in New Zealand. Everyone was terrified of this Labour-led coalition government, and no one knew what was going to happen. So no one brought unless they had to, for before and for about a year and a half afterwards, and that affected the market. They've been in there for 3 years. The wheel's gone on. Used to have annoyed several of us with some of the things they do, but the wheel's gone on, and now whether it's a national government, Labour government, whoever government it is, life's going to go on, and everyone realises that. And we're now a month out from the election, which isn't that far away anyway, and we're really at the moment sort of, I won't say who cares, but it's not going, in my opinion, it's not going to affect the property market whatsoever. There's two other many factors. There's so many buyers that's affecting the market, and COVID briefly for a couple of weeks affecting the market. So for me, that's my call anyway. And as I said, Auckland's been through some average years, so there's a lot of hurt still out there from a couple of years ago. And when they bring their property on, they need it sold. So there are some opportunities out there in the still pretty hot market. Serena, do you want me to turn my microphone off for a bit?